spokesperson for Georgia Governor Brian Kemp confirms that Jack Smith's office has contacted Kemp but declined to release any further details. You'll recall Trump pushed Kemp to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election results after he narrowly lost the state to Joe Biden. CNN's Marshall Cohen joins us now. Marshall, the target letter has already gone out to the former president. That means an indictment could come at any time. We thought there's a possibility it could happen late this past week, like yesterday, for example, so maybe in the coming days here very shortly. Is it a surprise? Should it be a surprise that the special counsel is still talking to people like the governor of Georgia as part of this case?
You know, I'm not too surprised because there were so many people, Jim, that were the target of Donald Trump's efforts in 2020 to overturn this election. So there's a lot of people to talk to. Who they want to interview first, who they want to interview last, that's up to the prosecutors. But Brian Kemp is a big name. Don't forget that during that critical period in 2020, after Trump lost the state of Georgia, but before the inauguration in January 21, Donald Trump spoke repeatedly with Brian Kemp. In public and in private, Trump tried to twist Kemp's arm to get him to basically violate his oath of office and step in to overturn the results in Georgia. So those conversations between Kemp and Trump, I can imagine that's what the prosecutors are going to be asking once they eventually get him maybe in front of the grand jury, perhaps an FBI interview. We're not quite sure at this time. But as you mentioned, with that target letter going out to former President Trump, an indictment really could come at any minute. That's typically the next step.
And in the classified documents case, the judge in this case, Judge Aileen Cannon, set the trial date for May 20th, 2024, assuming that it happens on that date, and of course it could slip beyond that. That will be in the thick, or actually it'll be sort of after the presidential Republican primary elections have kind of wrapped up. Trump could have this thing wrapped up, the primary process, before this trial even starts.
He could. He may be the presumptive nominee by the time this trial kicks off. If the trial schedule, I mean, it's not going to get earlier. It might go later.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it holds, he might be the presumptive nominee. At that point in time in 2016, he already was. Everyone else had dropped out.
Yeah.
But this decision from Judge Cannon, who is a Trump appointee, you know, she did not give Trump everything he wanted here. He asked for, frankly, he asked her not even to put a date on the calendar yet. And if you really, really had to, make it in 2025. She did not go there. She put it in May 24, but it's a lot later than what Special Counsel Jack Smith wanted. He wanted this trial to take place in December of this year. Presumably there would have been a verdict before the end of the year, before anyone cast a ballot, because of course, Jim, the Iowa caucuses are in January.
Yeah, coming very soon. All right, Marshall Cohen, thank you very much. Joining me now is the Michigan Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson. Madam Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. Great to talk to you again on this program. You were also interviewed by Justice Department prosecutors as part of the special counsel probe. It seems though there is a focus on what took place at the state level in places like Michigan and in Georgia and so on. We were just talking with our Marshall Cohen a few moments ago that there has been some interest at the special counsel's office in Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Can you talk about the importance of what took place at the state level between the 2020 election and January 6th and why that might be critically important to the special counsel?
Yeah, and thanks for having me. I think what this really reveals is the multifaceted, nationally coordinated effort we were facing in the states like Georgia and Michigan and Arizona in 2020 that really did take place on the ground. I mean, people who were claiming falsely to be electors of the state showed up at our state capitol. People showed up outside my home. And I think a lot of the investigation at the federal level should focus not just, and needs to focus not just on the effort to undo the election results, but on the violence that followed and the threats that came towards our election officials, because that was the precursor for the tragedy that unfolded at our Capitol on January 6th.
And let's talk about the case in Michigan. The new charging documents are revealing the Attorney General's case against 16 Republicans accused of trying to subvert the 2020 election process by falsely claiming that Donald Trump won the presidency. The fake electors are charged with forgery and conspiracy to commit election forgery. If convicted, they face up to 14 years in prison. Your reaction to these charges being filed and what I guess some of them are saying, which is they don't think they did anything wrong in this case.
Well, first, I'm gratified that the felony charges were filed. I think it reflects the gravity of what was attempted in 2020 in Michigan, and frankly in other states as well. And it wasn't just a wish and a ceremonial attempt to sign some things and say symbolically these are our electors. This was an actionable attempt to physically disrupt the Electoral College and the transmission of the Electoral College votes from Michigan to the United States government. And, it's important that we see consequences for what happened in Michigan in 2020 at the state and federal level, because right now, as we prepare for another presidential election next year, we need to assure voters and be assured ourselves that this isn't going to happen again. And so seeking consequences now for what happened in the past will help us prevent a reoccurrence of these instances in the future.
And let me ask you this. I mean, one argument that we've heard from defenders of these bogus electors, no matter what state they were in, is that they were just preparing to serve as legitimate electors in the event that Trump's legal efforts in the 2020 election were successful. I'm sure you've heard that argument made before. They've been made from people inside Trump world and so on. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I think we have to look at that in the context in which everything was unfolding. I mean, first, at the time when these so-called fake electors allegedly met in the basement of the state party, Republican Party building, all of the court cases had by and large been resolved. There had been, the election results had been certified. We had begun the process of transmitting the Electoral College votes, and we had asked and answered all of the questions. There was zero evidence of any widespread fraud. All of the evidence suggested and indicated the results of the election were and indeed are an accurate reflection of the will of the people. So there was really no ground to stand on to somehow say that you thought something was going to happen to somehow change the results at a later date. The election was done. The will of the voters was unequivocally clear. And, a lot of Republicans, including Republican leadership in the state legislature, recognized this and affirmed the results as well. And so when you look at mayors and the former co-chair of the party who chose instead of accepting the results to sign these electors' papers, you have to see, and I think the evidence shows, a willful, intentional effort to lie about the results simply because they didn't agree with them.
And based on what you know, do you think that this is a part of the special counsel's indictment that they may be preparing for the former president?
Well, we know that Michigan was not the only state where these shenanigans were attempted. We know in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Arizona and Georgia, it was a similar effort afoot. And so when you have a nationally coordinated effort like that, you do need to have a national consequence. And so I'm hopeful that the federal investigation will continue down that route. But what it's also uniquely poised to do is recognize the connection of those attempts to overturn the election and the lies surrounding them to the threats and the violence that so many of us experienced and that, again, we saw unfold at our Capitol on January 6th. It's all connected. And as atrocious as it was, as unprecedented as it was, we have to see consequences or else we have to prepare for it to unfold again.
And I was just about to ask you this. Do you worry something like this could happen again in 2024? Is there anything really stopping party officials getting together in basements and saying, well, we're going to be the alternate electors, in case our efforts to overturn the election work out, they pan out, hey, here we are, we're ready to go, there are our signatures on the page. Could this happen all over again if they wanted to?
Yes, because the only thing that ensured democracy prevailed in 2020 at this point were people of integrity on both sides of the aisle, secretaries of state, elected officials of both parties who said, no, that's not who we are, we're going to follow the law. That's what ensured democracy prevailed. And when we look at some of the personnel changes that have happened since 2020, we see not just more people stepping up who are pro-democracy, but, for example, someone who was my former opponent in 22 is now the head of the Republican Party in Michigan in 2024. And that person still has not accepted the results of past elections and tried to intervene with them in 2020 and in 22. So we have to be wide-eyed and clear-eyed about the opportunities that may exist for bad actors to try to overturn election results they don't like again in the future. And that's why legal consequences and political consequences, frankly, for the actions that occurred in past cycles are so important to see play out now.